Greetings from the beautiful Tralee Bay. My name is Victoria Kennefick, and my collection, Eat We Both Starve, is out with Carcanet Press. Many of the themes of the collection, grief and loss and the sea, build upon those I explored in my pamphlet White Whale, which was published by Southward Editions in 2015. But there are also new concerns, particularly those relating to the young female body coming of age in a society that seeks to control and consume it, and how that body, through a variety of young speakers, tries to take back that control and gain some agency, often through maybe damaging and limiting ways. I really enjoyed writing the collection. It was a labour of love for sure, but also a huge challenge. I suppose I wrote the poems individually, and I was very much concerned about the confusion of the growing body and how it changes and develops at a rate that is maybe much faster than the emotional self and the intellectual self, certainly in my case. And how I suppose there is an attempt when that becomes overwhelming to maybe be as I was and maybe willfully immature, and to try and maybe stop time or pause time or catch up with yourself, and how that sense of time and history and slippage and growth is overwhelming, and as I said, very, very confusing, and a kind of pandemonium of the body, if you like. So I wrote the poems over the course of 5 or so years, and I suppose it was only really maybe about 2017 where I began to see, with the help of a mentorship with the brilliant Rebecca Goss, a Carcanet poet, that I began to see that there was the bones of a collection there, and there was a narrative to some degree. I mean, the poems obviously stand by themselves, but also I think can be read together, because there are connections between them invariably. There would be. So collating them and organizing them was probably the greatest challenge. And I'm very lucky to have worked with the very brilliant and patient and inspired John McAuliffe. And we worked together to really make the collection, I think, the best it can be. So I'm really excited about it coming out. I like to work ideally in a study by a desk for many hours uninterrupted. And until my daughter was born, I didn't realize how privileged and lucky I was to have that. I've always had a desk in my room, in anywhere I've lived, or later on when we rented a study. And we have a study now, but I'm in there very, very infrequently since my daughter was born. So I find I've had to become a lot more flexible, a lot more adaptable, and to accept, I suppose, the limitations that, working as I do as a teacher and having a child and, being busy places restrictions on the time that I have, or the type of time I have maybe. So I find myself walking in this beautiful place. I'm so lucky to live in this absolutely stunning place, County Kerry. And I come out here a lot to Blennerville. There's a beautiful windmill here and a really nice walk. And I find that I often come up with ideas when I'm walking. And so I often have my phone with me, and I might record them on my voice notes, or I might just tap them out on the phone itself on my notes. And sometimes I might have a scrap of paper or the back of an envelope, and I write there. I have a collection of exquisite and beautiful notebooks at home that I intend to write in. And I don't know, I'm just scared to, because they're so beautiful and pristine. So one of my New Year's resolutions is to use my beautiful notebooks and scribble down whatever I need to, and use them. Life is short. Use your notebooks. So I think I'll return, to the study and to those uninterrupted hours. But for the moment, I'm making the most of my busy life and finding the moments, snatching the moments when I can, and doing my best at that. The most recent book that I read that really blew me away was the biography of Sylvia Plath by Heather Clark, Red Comet. Sylvia Plath is probably my greatest influence. I've loved her since I was a young teenager and first discovered her, and it was like a bomb going off in my heart. She just changed everything for me in terms of how I wrote and how I read and how I viewed the poetic life and how I viewed being a woman writing. And what's so extraordinary about the book that Heather Clark wrote is that it really shows the depth of genius, which obviously is evident in the writing, but also the extent of Sylvia Plath's ambition and how that was thwarted in the context in which he was living in 1950s England and America, where she wanted to be a perfect wife and a perfect mother. That's what society expected of her. But also, she had this burning brilliance to write these extraordinary poems and this brilliant novel, and how that ultimately burnt her out. And small wonder, it's extraordinary that she managed to achieve what she did, given what she was up against. And it is the closest I've ever come to living somebody else's life. And I was broken after reading it. I've never cried so much reading a book. And I really recommend it. It's an incredible work of scholarship and a reclamation, really, of Sylvia Plath's life in a very sensitive and beautiful way. My favourite sections in the collection, or my favourite pieces of the collection, I suppose, would be the sequences. One is a broken sequence called Hunger Strikes, and it explores the lives and very strange and toxic and damaging habits of saints and martyrs in the Catholic faith. And I was drawn to this topic, I suppose, being Irish Catholic and growing up in that world and being exposed to the lives of these young women, and I suppose not realising just how damaging their choices, or in fact their lack of choices, were, and how they often used control, methods of control like starvation, to remove themselves from the demands placed on them as women in this society, particularly to marry or to have children. So what option did they have if they didn't want to do either of those things? They had nothing. So really it was about how they managed to thwart or subvert the forces that tried to control them by playing them at their own game, ultimately. And I found that incredibly interesting and tragic and heartbreaking and difficult to read and to research. But ultimately, I think there's a lot of correlations between what women were doing then in terms of trying to control their own agency and their own narrative, and what women might do now in order to do the same under different circumstances, but ultimately, I think, still quite damaging. The other sequence is called Second Family, and it explores the experience, I suppose, of being part of a second family, where the first family maybe is made incomplete by the death of one of the parents, or maybe by separation, and how the subsequent family feels about that. And I think it's often a family that is maybe portrayed negatively, with good reason, in many respects, in terms of myth and legend and so on, and fairy tales. But one, I think, is such an unstable, in many cases, situation to be in, to be a second family or a replacement, and I use air quotes there, for the first family. A kind of cuckoo syndrome, if you like. It was a very emotional sequence to write and a very difficult one. But I'm proud that it's in the book, and I think it's important that it's there. It very much links many of the themes together. And I'm interested to see what people will think about it and what they think when they read it. I think that's everything. And thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to sharing poems with you and the book with you all. And take care and mind yourself.